Welcome to Staring to the Abyss. I'm your host, Richard Gerlach. With me, as always, is Matt Brandenburg.
What's up, everybody?
And all the way from Iceland is Vitlame Mist.
Heyo!
With our special guest, the author of The Plastic Priest, Nicole Cushing.
Pleased to be here.
Yay!
Pleased to have you.
Oh man, this is right from the start. I'll just say I loved it. But I love this book. But what's been awesome is like the random because I guess I'm really jumping the gun because I know it comes out in December, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. December 15th is the official release date.
Yeah.
So I'm jumping way ahead. We can get to that. We can get to that too later. But just what I've been like, I get the people who have the arcs and everyone I've talked to. They're just like, oh, it's so good. Like I was hanging out with Carson Winter and he absolutely adored it. So it's definitely one of those things that I think a lot of people are gonna love.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think like once it comes out, it's really gonna find an audience because it is. This book is just, we'll be discussing it a bit more in depth later in the podcast, but this book is a lot of fun. It's hard to make me actually laugh reading a book, and I like guffawed a couple of times reading this. So just gonna put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, like, and I know it's been a while since we've had you on, and I can't remember if it was Half Freaks when you were on, or maybe we just talked about Half Freaks like so long ago, but
I think was it Mothwoman maybe last time?
Yes, it was Mothwoman. Yeah.
Mothwoman. So obviously Mothwoman, we love that too, but just like thinking about the way I was cackling as much as I was during Half Freaks, I think even more so with this one.
I'm a working class guy.
Yes. But
the Half Freaks is great. Like I honestly, everything I've read by you, Nicole, I've immensely enjoyed. So,
thank you. Yeah, I know, folks. I didn't pay these people.
Allegedly, I'm joking.
This is like coming spontaneously from them. I don't have assassins with like rifles. Aimed
Good luck pointing that here in fucking Iceland.
This is all legitimate praise, and, heartfelt, and not at all the result of any particular carrot or stick being used to increase the praise.
Amazing.
But your new book,
should we always have this kind of disclaimer whenever we have guests here now?
Maybe.
Yes, maybe. Your new book, The Plastic Priest, it comes out December 15th, I believe.
Yeah, that's the release date from Cemetery Dance.
So make sure you get that pre-order in if you're listening to this podcast.
Yes.
You get that order ahead of time. Make sure you get a copy because it's definitely one of the books you'll be hearing about a lot, I think, come the end of the year.
It's quite a delight.
It is. And it's an easy read. It's like 100 pages. You read it in an afternoon.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. If you want to get out of the Christmas stress, just read this one. It's really good.
I mean, if you just want to escape your reality stress, it's a great way to step out of our own reality or existence or see things in a different way.
If you just need to shed your soul, just read the
book. Just have a couple of phrases installed in you, and you'll be good to go.
Yep.
But before we dive into our deeper discussion with The Plastic Priest, we should go over just some media that we've consumed in the last week. I surprisingly don't have as much as I normally do, so this might be a shorter section than it usually is. But I'll get my big one out of the way. The other day, I went to see Godzilla Minus One in the theaters.
So jealous.
It's so good. Like, I mean, I'm a sucker for like kaiju movies anyway. Like, you put a big monster on a movie screen and I'm there. Like, I'm all about it. But like, there's something about Godzilla movies where, like, obviously Godzilla's main thing was just a metaphor for the atomic bomb. But like, if you think about it, just a giant monster destroying a city, it shouldn't be that hard to do it outside of like a Japanese movie studio. But nobody can fucking do these movies right, but Toho.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know why, but
I don't know why either. Like, it seems like it's the easy thing to do. At least on paper, it sounds easy, but for some reason, I don't know what happens because, like, this movie was great. Shin Godzilla, the one that came out a few years ago, that one was also great. All the American ones have been crap.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
And like there are bad Japanese ones, but even the bad Japanese ones are still fun.
Yeah, there's still some charm.
There's still a lot of like charm and fun about the movies, but this new one is like it takes place in post-war Japan, and it follows our character who is a failed kamikaze pilot. He chickens out on his mission and pretends his plan's malfunctioning to land on an island and become one of the survivors of a Godzilla attack. And the rest of the movie kind of explores his PTSD and survivor's guilt as he's kind of meets up with other people and try to forge a life together. And then while Tokyo is finally rebuilding itself after World War II, Godzilla comes out of the ocean and attacks Tokyo.
Nice.
And it is just a really solid, fun kaiju movie.
That is great to hear because it looks like it from the trailers.
And I will say the atomic breath scenes are badass. Like they made the atomic breath terrifying.
That's awesome.
Like, so if you're a Godzilla fan, definitely go check it out in theaters. I don't know if you've noticed this, Matt, or I don't know if they're doing this like your way either, Nicole, but I'm noticing at least around here, we're getting more foreign movies in cinemas.
Huh.
Which is kind of nice to see.
I haven't noticed that.
Because, like, it's not a lot. It's not a lot. This is the only, honestly, of all the movies I've seen this year in theaters, only 2 were foreign. Because I got to see When Evil Lurks in the theaters back in October.
Yeah.
And then I just saw Godzilla. But I don't know. I think it's cool. It seems to be happening a little bit that we're getting some non-big Hollywood movies in the theaters.
Yeah.
That sounds really encouraging. I don't go to the theater all that often, but anytime that there's something different from the same bland offerings that Hollywood provides, I'm all for it.
Yes.
Me too. Like I think it's good just to get, I don't know, different perspectives, different types of movies coming out.
Yeah.
And one last thing I will say before I give it over to Matt is the other movie I watched this week was the seminal masterpiece, which is the American version of Speed Racer that the Wachowskis did back in 2008.
Yeah.
That movie rules.
I actually never saw it.
Honestly, this isn't even a joke. That movie is so fun to watch.
It looks sweet.
It is a visual spectacle. The acting is hammy as all hell. They knew what they were making when they made this movie. And it's just a really fun movie that even if you're in a bad mood, because I was in a terrible mood yesterday, and it was the best way to end that day was just watching that movie. But Matt, what about you?
Well, let's see. I did go through a number of novellas, but I'm only going to talk about 2. And the first one's very depressing, which is Garrett Cook's A God of Hungry Walls. And this novella is about a house, and we are seeing it from the perspective of the house, and the house is haunted. And it has, I don't know, there's like 4 or 5 roommates in there. And this house is the most twisted, messed up thing that you can imagine. And it puts these people who are not all great people to begin with. So you're kind of on a weird line of like being upset at what's happening to them, but at the same time being like, well, these, like, if I met these people in real life, I would think they were horrible people to begin with anyway. So not saying they deserve what happens, but it's just, it's one of those like dirty, nasty books that as you're reading it, you don't feel good. But it's written excellently. Garrett Cook is an amazing writer, and he can build just this, he could just make you enthralled by these like just nasty, gross things and everything that he is doing to these people. And that's basically, the house is just using them as like playthings, and like really twisted, gross playthings. And it keeps going and going and going. And there's like an arc, because something has appeared into this house that is messing with it a little bit. And that's kind of taking you through what's going on. But I mean, like, if you are at all like this is like a content warning central of a book, because just, I mean, there's so much stuff that happens in this thing that you're like, every page you turn, you're surprised, maybe not surprised, but just like amazed that he is writing what he is writing about. And so if you're into really dark, dirty, kind of nasty stuff, God of Hungry Walls is great. That would totally be something up your alley. And the other book, which also was kind of dirty, nasty, but was like dirty, nasty in a fun way, was Matthew Mitchell's Chaindevils, which just came out maybe like 2 weeks ago. And this is sort of a take on like a Warhammer 40,000 kind of, big guys and lots of armor and chainsaw swords and nasty guns. Take on that kind of thing, but then it's also kind of like a redneck kind of thing, because it's based in the Ozarks, and so all our Chaindevils are just these kind of like rednecky kind of people, and he's saying this isn't me passing judgment. That's part of the charm of this book, is that's who they are, and they're just, this is a thing they do, and it's sort of a post-apocalyptic story, and you're following this group, like battalion. And, their whole thing is, they get hopped up on any kind of drugs they want, and that kind of spurs them into this crazy action, and they're protecting their queen by just chainsawing people in the most horrific ways possible. And they get put on kind of like a quest to go to this other non-great person that cooks meth, and they're trying to take him out. In between there's like these weird cultists with skeleton heads that give them the Chaindevils these drugs that make them even crazier. And so it's all over the top, done on purpose, over the top. And it was a blast, but kind of just like God of Hungry Walls, there's a lot of like horrific imagery in there. So if you're not ready for it, it might be shocking. But I had a lot of fun with it until like the very end. There's like a 6-page chapter that like kind of deviates and is talking about something completely different than any of the characters that are in the story. And I think it's supposed to lead to something, but that was my only downside to it, is like you're at the end after all these big things, and you go into this weird chapter that doesn't seem to fit. And that kind of like threw off the momentum of the rest of the story. But besides that, everything was a blast. It's a wild, crazy ride. Definitely look up the cover if you haven't seen it, because it's just an amazing, like, old heavy metal cover kind of thing. So yeah,
it looks like a GWAR album cover, honestly.
It does. And like
it reminds me of like the first time I saw GWAR like on a CD shelf.
And GWAR is a great comparison, because it is that goopy and bloody, just like what their shows would be like. This is what this book is. I mean, and there's lots of very inventive kills and scenes. I saw somebody kind of compare it a little bit to like a Blood Meridian, which, yeah, I could kind of see that. I mean, it's not Cormac McCarthy, but like you can kind of see where this is coming from, where it's just these horrible people doing horrible things, but you're kind of in it and you're kind of digging what's happening, and you're just in it for that ride. But it is different than that, but just that was like a subtle comparison I've seen. So yeah, those are the two main things that I wanted to talk about.
And Finley, what about you?
Well, I haven't really done a lot of reading or watching for that matter. Basically, still playing Baldur's Gate 3, of course. Actually, I've started my second playthrough.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, because you can, like I said, there are so many options, and I decided to, because in my first playthrough, I played the easy option, so now I'm playing in the balanced option, so it's like a balance of the fights being hard and stuff, and there's also an option where you can like go on a slightly different storyline in which your character is haunted by something, and she or he, it depends on if you want to go with female or male. I always go female. She's like has these really dark like urges that compels her to like brutally kill people. And you can like decide whether you want to go through with that. It was like just let her dwell on her urges and just let her kill everyone she sees, or you can choose to resist it, see what happens with that. And because I'm a pacifist and I can't be completely evil, I'm of course resisting the fucking dark urges. But I find it fitting because I'm playing as a paladin right now. But I decided to multi-class into a bard, and it's so fun. I always thought bards were like not the best like players in D&D, but the dialogue options as a bard are hilarious. And I've managed to basically not having to fight any of the bosses because I can just persuade them to kill themselves.
Nice.
And it's like the best fucking power thrill ever. It's like, oh, I have 5+ in charisma checked. I'm gonna persuade you to kill yourself.
Oh my god.
And yeah, it's so much fun, and it's also like completely different. Like when it comes to the companions in the game, it's like when they discover that you have like these urges, it really depends on like how your relationship is with them. Of course, I'm romancing Vampy Boy again because how can I not? And he's like, "Oh my god, we're so really alike. I mean, I'm a vampire and I have to kill people, and you have these dark urges, so we're a good team." And I'm like, "I'm actually resisting this, you asshole, but yeah, sure, we're a good team." But yeah, so it's really fun, and I discovered like being balanced in the balanced option rather than in the easy option. It's a lot harder than I expected. I was like, holy shit! I started with 12 HP. Jesus! Like while in the easy option, I had like 50 HP at the beginning. I'm like, I'm sailing through this. And then in the balance, I'm like, okay, I really have to choose my fucking battles now. I have to really strategize. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to go through this?
Yeah.
It's like it was so easy because I was like in the other playthrough, I was like cleric, and I'm like, I have all the spells and I can also do damage. Woohoo! And now I'm like, oh shit, I don't have as much healing. Oh crap! I need a cleric. So I really have to in each place I get to, I have to really like stop and think like, okay, so which companion is really good for this scenario? Do I want the barbarian or do I want the cleric? Fuck. And then I'm forced to have the fucking wizard with me because I'm like, you have spells, but you suck, but okay. It's a lot of fun, guys. I make it sound like it's such a tour, but it's so much fun.
Honestly, I want to play it so bad, but I can't.
It's gonna come on Xbox. I've heard.
Yeah, I have an old PlayStation 4.
Yeah, no. That's unfortunate. But yeah, other than that, I did actually finish Kristopher Triana's along the River of Flesh this morning actually.
Nice.
How was it?
I thought the first book was better, but I did call everything out as soon as I started the book. I had my theories; they all stood out.
Well, that's good.
No, it feels like it feels a bit predictable now.
Also, I think like you've read a decent amount of Kristopher Triana stuff, haven't you?
No, I've only read The Gone to See the Room and this one.
Oh, you got to read some more Kristopher stuff.
I know.
His books are brutal.
I know. Well, this one, to be fair, and then this might be because I haven't read that much of his books, but I didn't think the second one had a lot of gore in it, to be honest. Like not
all his books are gory. Sometimes they're brutal, like psychologically.
Yeah. Like the first book was super psychological horror. Like holy crap! I had to take a pause after that book, and just like read something happy or just watch Friends or something. But this one, like, yeah, they had the shocks and everything. And the one of the disgusting bits that I knew about what was going to happen to the fucking cop, what the cop was, which is like predictable. But at the same time, I was like kind of a little bit let down that he did not, like, he did get the fate that he deserved. But I wanted it to be explicitly described. Because that fucker had that coming. And I'm not, hopefully I'm not spoiling that by saying that, but yeah, he had that fucking coming. So
I gotta get to that one someday.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer than the first book, but I think and I'm just talking through audiobooks, like hours. Like I think the first book was like maybe 3.5 or 4 hours. This one was maybe 5.5 hours. So that's like it didn't add that much, I think.
No, that's not too bad.
Yeah, but all in all, I enjoyed it. But like I said, I wanted more.
Understood.
Because I do like everything regarding revenge. So yeah.
Yeah. Also, like double check some of Kristopher's other stuff because his books get pretty wild.
Yeah.
He's good stuff.
I know. I like with everything around here. I need to read more, but you only have so much time in your life, and my mind is completely devoted to Baldur's Gate at the moment. So yeah.
And Nicole,
hopefully
what
during
about you?
Christmas.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I've been watching an old TV show that I first saw when I was a teenager. It's called Wise Guy. It originally aired like 1987 on CBS, I think. And I have not seen it really much since that point. And it's streaming for free on Tubi. So I saw that it was streaming for free, and I thought, well, let me go ahead and watch this. And it's very, very well done. It was one of the first television shows that had an arc for the story going multiple episodes. It's about an undercover FBI agent who infiltrates the mob first. He infiltrates the Italian mafia in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And then after he takes down the mob boss, he is assigned to infiltrate another organization, which involves international arms deal and eventually ends up involving like an American plan to instigate a coup in a Central American country. So it's very, very smart, and that's what I like about it. And it's also because part of the stress that our lead character, whose name is Vinny Terranova, Vinny Terranova is assigned to these cases, and he has to get to know these people and earn their trust. And in the course of doing that, he learns to appreciate some things about them. But he has shared experiences with them, and in the first case ends up almost being like a brother to the guy, but then he has to take the guy down. And so what I love about the show, I recommend the first season. After the first season, it really takes a downward plunge. But the first season can almost just be seen as a narrative in and of itself. And what I love is that everyone is paranoid and kind of going mad, and questioning who they are and questioning where their loyalties are. And it's like I said, just the intrigue. It was one of the first appearances on television of a very young Kevin Spacey. Now, of course, we all know what happened with Kevin Spacey, but taking that aside and just focusing on this thing that happened, where he was, I think in his like late 20s, early 30s, when he played in this TV show. He plays a kind of a very unstable international arms dealer / drug runner named Mel Prophet, who has an incestuous relationship with his sister, Susan Prophet. And our undercover agent ends up having a sexual relationship with Susan Prophet. And there's all this intrigue and like undercover stuff. And, there's a little bit of action in it because, of course, it's an American TV show from the 80s. But it's really, really, really smart. So if you think that, the heyday of television started with cable shows, not necessarily so, because they're in like the late 80s. There was this brief shining period where you had an awesome TV show. So yeah, season 1 of Wise Guy is a strong recommend, and you can get it for free on Tubi. The other piece of media that I've been consuming is a novel by one of my favorite novelists, Milan Kundera, who is not a horror author. He's a literary, if you're going to say quote unquote literary writer. But it's called The Farewell Party, and it's about a musician who has impregnated one of his fans at a show that he did, and he has to convince her to have an abortion.
Oh, wow.
And it's about all of his, psychological games he plays to try to get her to have an abortion, and all the advice he gets from his buddies about how to, trick her. Should he treat her with cruelty? Should he treat her, amorously? What's the best way to manipulate her? And then it's about the woman and her, manipulation of everyone. And then it's also about all these characters. They meet up at this health spa because that's where he originally gave the concert. And you see the musician's wife is involved at some point. She comes to visit. And then you have a dissident who has gotten permission to leave the country. And he's there. And he has brought with him, he has for his entire life in the country. At a certain point, he obtained like a suicide pill, and he's going to give it back to the physician who gave it to him, who's working at this health spa. And then that pill gets mixed in with other pills, and it's so it's like, so you have this on the one hand this abortion sort of theme, on the other hand you have this suicide pill theme, and at the same time it's a funny book. It's kind of comedy and drama at the same time, as only Milan Kundera can do it. So highly recommend The Farewell Party, or pretty much anything by Milan Kundera, and highly recommend Wise Guy, the TV show on Tubi.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds awesome. Great.
Yeah.
I didn't read Kundera. I haven't read any of his stuff in a while. I should fix that. But I like what I did read.
Yeah, I love him. He just speaks to me in a way that not a whole lot of other writers speak to me. And I love him because he's a novelist, and his novels aren't always very long, but he's a novelist, and he's doing very interesting things with the novel in terms of the kind of cerebral effect that he is able to achieve, and also the emotional effect that he's able to achieve. But I like the kind of fiction that makes my neurons tingle,
Yeah.
that kind of like gives me that kind of swoony feeling in my brain that I'm being taken someplace that I didn't anticipate, or taken someplace, being led to observations I would not ordinarily have made. And so, yeah, I highly recommend reading something of Kundera's.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, should we dive into the Plastic Priest?
I think.
Oh, sure. Why?
Let's go dive in.
Yeah.
So just so we're aware, we have not been paid. Everything we're saying.
Yes.
Blink twice if you were being held hostage. Everything we're saying is our honest reaction to this book. It is. I personally love this book a lot. So.
Yeah, and I think since it's new, well, not even out, by the time this airs, which will air this week, it won't be out yet. So we will do our best, listeners. We won't spoil anything. This will just be a general
if
discussion.
we do, we'll say spoilers. So there's at least separate the spoiler section.
Yeah,
for people who don't want that.
I think that's fair. So yeah, I guess I think the first fun question will be, so I've seen before the show we were talking about your Patreon, and how you're kind of morphing away to doing your own thing, not just straight like horror kind of stuff. So I mean, in this one, I think it shows. So what I mean, is it? So the question is, if I can get my words right, is why with this one did you kind of feel like I'm going to do my own thing and have fun with it? Or have you been kind of tinkering with that all the way through? And then this is kind of like the birth of that.
I think that I have had a evolution or devolution or just metamorphosis over the last, I would say, since 2016 or so, of just, really writing to express what's in my heart, and without reference to genre. And part of that stems from the fact that the majority of what I read is, Eastern European stuff that defies genre. There are some Eastern European writers who are highly skilled at writing about very dark things, but they're not using the tropes of horror fiction to do that. You can say someone like Kafka maybe fits into horror, but it's a little bit of you have to squint, I think, a little bit to see that. And you could say he is in the tradition of the weird. I think I probably fit a little bit more into the sense of weird fiction, or the weird, the capital W weird that you see a lot these days. But I don't know. I think you saw some of that with A Sick Gray Laugh. I think some of that was also in Mothwoman, maybe a little bit less because it dealt with the Mothman legend, which is at least horror adjacent. Because cryptids are kind of part of horror. But I'm just interested in exploring what it is to be alive. I know that sounds very highfalutin and very the people who don't know what the word pretentious means will go ahead and label that as pretentious. To which I would ask, what am I pretending? Because that's what the word pretentious means. But I think I'm just more interested. I mean, a part of it is I'm 50 years old, and so a lot of the horror conventions just bore the shit out of me. And it's like I've thought about maybe I could do my unique take on vampires and werewolves and witches and this kind of thing, and I can start a project along those lines, but I'm just not there isn't enough fuel in the engine to make that happen. And so in this particular case, my father died in 2021, And shortly after his death, the Episcopal priest, because I was raised in the Episcopal Church, which is the priest in the book is a female priest, because the Episcopal Church has ordained women as priests since I think the late 70s. But the Episcopal priest from my local parish back home in Maryland came to the house and did a lot of the traditional readings that you do after someone has died. That famous psalm about, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, etc. Yeah. And I just started bawling like a baby. And, it's like I'm not somebody who is an Orthodox believer in pretty much anything, but I had a definite spiritual, emotional family experience because I'm there assembled with my siblings and my mom, and we're there in the same room where my dad died. And that was one of the most powerful emotional experiences I've ever had, and didn't have a damn thing to do with horror. And so I wanted to write about the Episcopal Church in part just as a kind of nod to that experience, and in a sense of talking about the fact that I have this attachment to this church, but there's no actual way that I could ever have a reunion with it. Because I can't really buy into Christianity, but there are so many memories that are positive about it, and so it's about that love-hate. And then I thought about writing about a priest who is also having a love-hate relationship with the church, and seeing where that went, and a priest who tries to really psych herself up into believing in Christianity and performs all these mental gymnastics to find ways that it might be metaphorically true. And all the other games that people play in their heads. To me, that's a hell of a lot more interesting than horror. Not to have any cast aspersions upon horror, because horror has been very good to me, and I have to respect the tastes of horror readers. But I think for me, there is a process of almost a growing up and saying, okay, let's look at life with a little bit more depth, and let's look at what is important about being alive, or what's important about death, or what's important about climate change, or what's important about the dynamics of living in a small town. Yeah. And I think that kind of explains where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, no, the small town stuff, that was perfect.
Yeah, no, the small town stuff was dead on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I
feel no matter where you live in the world, the small town stuff affects, like, you're like, yep, that's any small town.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up in a small town, grew up in a tiny town. I mean, at the time that I was growing up, it had maybe like 1,500 people. I think now it might have 4,500 people. I live now in what I think could be called a small city. I'm in like a suburban area in southern Indiana, which is, the part of southern Indiana just across the Ohio River from Louisville, Kentucky. And I work in Louisville, and I, cross the bridge to go into Indiana because it's a lot cheaper over here, because the love of my life is over here. And we have a nice little house here in a blue collar subdivision. But yeah, so it would be very difficult for me to re-enter a small town and live there all the time, because I think it's interesting when people from the city move to a small town, like as part of their midlife crisis. I think what they expect is it's going to be so liberating because you don't have to deal with all the people. And the exact opposite happens, because what happens is that there's a much smaller stage, and any individual looms as a greater presence on that stage. And, instead of interacting with 100 people a day, you're interacting with 2 or 3, and chances are most of them are going to be assholes. And so it's inescapable, where the anonymity of a city is a lot more easy to deal with. You might have a 5-second interaction with an asshole at a traffic light, but you don't have to deal with the fact that these assholes are coming to knocking on your door and asking where you go to church, and bringing out the welcome wagon and that kind of thing.
It's like, that kind of reminds me too is just in small towns, you kind of see both the best and worst of people, like at the same time.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I can buy into that because I mean I don't want to. I mean I grew up in a small town and I ended up having a fairly strong public school education in a small town. It was a small town in Maryland. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. The fact that, it was a small town in a mostly urban state. And so the curriculum might have been hammered out in a very specific way. But when you grow up in a small town, you don't know that things are unusual. I grew up in a house where we had a farm in back of us and they had cattle. We did not have a farm, but in back of us there was a farm. There was no sidewalk on the streets that led to any place else. So without a car, I was kind of like on this little island, and the most exciting thing that would happen is like the neighbors had a dog with only 3 legs, and the dog would come like a pogo stick kind of, coming around to our house. And it's like, hey, look, there's the 3-legged dog. And that was how we entertained ourselves, pointing out oddities about, the dog or also, I think that's where some of the writing came from because when I was a teenager, my brother and I would write these little comedy scripts to each other, and it would be like taking a sitcom and adding an unusual spin on it. So like Sanford and Son Meet the Werewolf was one of our projects, where they're adding a macabre aspect to a 70s sitcom, or doing these satirical profiles of celebrities where this person who was you think of as like it turns out Jim J. Bullock from Too Close for Comfort is actually a reactionary radical right winger. And, it's like all these kind of, taking obscure entertainment figures and satirizing them. And that was entertainment because, I mean, we had TV, but there wasn't a whole lot to watch on television. And we didn't really have a VCR. I mean, I think the thing about my generation X is there's this stereotype that we all were like the kids in Stranger Things and we all had crazy independence and we all had VCRs when we were 10 years old and we all went and saw like Evil Dead on VHS or whatever. And that was not my experience. I grew up in a small town with very traditional parents, and I think we got a VCR maybe when I was like 14 or so, 15, and there was no video store in town. There was no Chinese restaurant in town. I can remember that. It was a big deal. We got a Chinese restaurant in our town, I think, in like my junior or senior year of high school. So there wasn't a McDonald's in my town until I was 13 or 14.
Oh,
so it's
crazy.
you don't really think about it as being this unusual way of living until you get out of it. And then you realize, this was not necessarily mainstream way of growing up. And it definitely gives you grist for the mill.
Definitely. Well, and I think we can see that in this because the town Owlingsville definitely plays a huge role in this story.
Well, actually, it's Owlingsville.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Owlingsville. Come on, man.
Everyone out of town thinks it's Owlingsville, but the locals pronounce it Owlingsville.
That is correct. Well, and I love that too. It's funny. Like I'll get back to the town because that just brought up like a good point. The voice, like your narrator voice, is like just like pitch perfect in this. I love this, having like this person kind of telling us this story and giving us these little asides, like the way to pronounce it, or even, and this definitely is not a spoiler, but having the thinker statue be pessimistic.
Yes. Right.
I just was dying from that. And just like we get these fun asides, and some of them, so I just love that. That gives it such a character and gives us this like sitting down and listening to the tale about Kay and what she goes through. And so that was just my aside. I just think that was great. And
thank you.
No problem. But like with the town, I think I really was digging this like look at kind of like a small town, like we've been saying, but I think it's such a character, and like you can, for people who either been in one or lived in one or currently living in one, you can see these people, because this is quite the common take of like the town only having a Walmart and a Subway and and the one family, and that kind of rules, maybe not rules over is the right word, but is like the higher top tier people in that town. And just I think that's such like a fun thing that we've been like, I on the show. I think there was another story we've talked about with the small town view, but I think I dig this kind of look, because we've been kind of, in this world of kind of, I don't know, whimsy about these bigger places and all these things. So it's kind of fun to get into kind of that, like, which I think we've talked about, working class, blue collar type of people, and and seeing these places and kind of highlighting like, hey, these are real people that maybe don't get talked about enough.
True. I mean, there is, of course, a long tradition of, the small town in horror fiction where it's almost a cliche of like the small town where sinister things happen.
Yeah.
And I wanted to very self-consciously not necessarily go there, where the people become kind of they're not actual people with depth, but it's very easy to make these characters in small towns appear as caricatures or types or stereotypes, and this sort of thing. So it's one thing to to address it on those terms, and other to kind of let these characters breathe a little bit, and that doesn't mean that there aren't stereotypes that they participate in, because there are, but what I hope is you get to see a little bit about why they are participating in those stereotypes, why this person is a Trump supporter, or why, not that it's any excuse, but like the idea that the one character who is actually a gay guy, who is a mortician in town, and he gives lots of money to the Republican Party because he wants to be included, and he's trying not to to stand out like a sore thumb, and that's like his, it's like the indulgence that he pays, almost in the sense of like the Catholic Church. He gives this money for what he perceives as the forgiveness of his sin, and in the community it kind of functions like that. So they'll take his money and they'll kind of let him in the door, but they don't overly embrace him. And I think that is, and that's one example of somebody who is like a Trumpist in the book. And then there are others who are just kind of ignorant and blustery, and they are dumb people who are attracted to a dumb candidate, and because he represents them, the dumb like people who are dumb, and so it's I like exploring that, and as you get older, you kind of look back at your roots, and you want to explore them, and explore why you are the way you are, and how these parts of you from your childhood have developed. And so that's part of what was going on there.
Yeah. And I think no, it's nice that way. And I think even brought up at some point in the story just about being the big fish in that small pond. And I think that's such an accurate thing, that idea of like, there's a business that was booming in there was a gypsum mine, and then that kind of falls under, but they don't leave because that's where they're big. And I think that's such like a thing you see where these people who kind of have that money and they have the lineage, and they're just going to be there in this small place because it's safe and they know it. And oh gosh, the Trump thing, I think is, and this is, I don't think this is a slight spoiler, but I love the way you did this. There's the concept of action figures and a kid playing with the toys and how we mix and match. And that perfectly explains, like, with the Trump thing, when you say what you say in the story. And I was just like, that is so genius.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our politics is becoming very bizarre, and you're taking characters from one setting, which is a so-called reality TV show, and you're putting them into a different setting, kind of like in the same way as if you take G.I. Joes and you start, fighting He-Man with them. You're taking these characters from this one kind of fandom and transplanting them to the other and playing with them. And that seems to be what history is doing with us now. It's taking these celebrity figures and who have very little in the way of common sense or decency or like honor or anything. Just, what they have is like this strange sort of charisma that comes from cruelty and sort of decorative cruelty that is an assholery that is like that what they're draped in. It's festooned with it, and people are apparently, a lot of people are attracted to that because it's so outrageous. And so this is very strange times that we're happening in. I sometimes wonder if Trump never happened, if Trump hadn't happened, part of me thinks that I would just continue writing regular horror stories, about people who are psychologically maligned, because that's kind of the trajectory I was going on until 2015. 2015, I had, my novel, Mr. Suicide, comes out, which is very psychological, very inward looking, but also probably the most recognizably horror thing I've written, in that it kind of deals with someone who takes a life in a kind of brutal and psychologically damaged sort of way. And but then, the next novel comes out. Next novel doesn't come out till 2019, and it's A Sick Gray Laugh, and it's like I had to deal with the fact that reality was crumbling. Everything I thought I understood about the world and about why, the idea that the fundamentalist Christians are embracing this guy, and he can go ahead and attempt a coup. And then even now, he is like the front runner for the Republican nomination and slightly edging out the Democratic candidate in the polls. And it's like, what the hell is this? It's like it's history as parody, and I just don't know what to do with it. So I think the last several books have been my way of trying to make peace with the fact that everything is so unreal.
It's honestly, I definitely see it. And I think the Trump election changed how a lot of people view both America and the world around them. I know it did for me, and I saw it happening living outside of the country. So it was like a window on the outside looking in, and I'm like, what the hell is going on to my home?
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I want to rewind about the book that I like is something you do early on to get us to kind of relate to the character Kay a bit more, Mother Kay. Just the second chapter, 7 Reasons Kay Doesn't Change Careers, is like one, hilarious, and 2, one of the best ways for us to kind of see who Kay is as a person. And I just love, it's just like, reason 1, middle-age inertia. Reason 2, Kay doesn't want to hear her mother say, I told you so.
Yeah.
And like,
I mean, and being middle-aged now, I mean, there are things like, there are steps that you have taken to define your life that are more or less unchangeable. There's no way to go back to your 20s. Now, I'm very happy with the decisions I've made in my life, but there is a sense of, if I had, it's kind of fruitless to say, I wish I would have gone back and done this, but I'm not going to go to school for anything ever again. I think that's pretty clear. I don't know what kind of travel I'll eventually do, but I'm not going to make a life out of traveling. That's for sure. And so on and so on. I'm not going to have kids. There's all these sorts of decisions that you make that I think when you're young, you have a sense that life is always in flux to the point where any decision that you make can be unmade at a later date. And then my findings, at least, and I'm just a sample size of one here, so for what kind of take it with a grain of salt. But it's not necessarily like that. You make choices along the way that define your life. For example, being in the Midwest, this is where my life is. This is where my husband's life is. This is where our employers are, and I'm probably not going to be going back to the East Coast. So those kinds of things, and I think it's important to play around with that a little bit. And then, of course, you have the connection with family, and what does my mom think of me? Which, even in my experience, even as someone who's middle-aged, I don't escape that. For all the boldness that we can say about F them, there's still an attachment there and love, and it's natural, I think, to maybe not need their approval, but wish that it's there at least, or to be at least on good footing in the relationship with them. So I think this is a middle-aged book. Not to say that younger people can't get it or won't get it, but it's informed by my where I am, and I'm, like I said, I'm 50 years old. Proud of my being 50 years old, because there are times in my life where I probably, could have very easily have not been not achieved this age. Times in my life where I would have maybe bailed out on life and that kind of thing. So the fact that I persisted and have cobbled together something I find reasonably enjoyable is I think a credit.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. You have any questions, Vitlame?
I'm just not really questions. Just with the last part of the story, like when the little boy up in the sky, just really resonated with me.
Yes.
It just really did. I just kept thinking of myself when I was a kid and just playing with my Smurfs and my brother's He-Man figurines, and just creating this kind of world where everyone was not doing what they were supposed to be and stuff. It's a lot of fun. And it gave me this nostalgic feeling, and I appreciate that.
Oh,
thank you. See, warm, cuddly feelings coming from the Cushing book.
Yeah.
It's a new experience coming from a Cushing book.
Yeah,
it was definitely a Kafka-esque nostalgic feeling, but I really appreciate it nonetheless.
Yes. Well, that's the highest praise I think I can ever get is I mean, to be able to unite, a sense of nostalgia with something as off kilter and strange as Kafka.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, I think for people who are approaching this book and wondering, okay, what am I getting into? I think like the reviews that have kind of, I think, most gotten it are the ones that have said this is kind of like Kafka but with a humorous side. So I think dark humor is probably the best way to sum it up. With a kind of surreal fantasy element, and so not necessarily, I would say, horror adjacent, but not, the point of this book is not to frighten you.
Just
a nerve definitely would fit in there though.
A what?
Unnerving a little bit.
Yeah, unnerving. Yeah, I think that I saw someone say eerie. So I think that's probably accurate, and kind of what I was going for too. I mean, the other thing is there is with the ending of it, I thought I would try to conjure up the same feeling that one gets when one considers certain aspects of the paranormal. And where there is a definite riddle that develops in one's own mind about, did this actually happen or did it not? And that just, there's this phrase that is used in UFO circles of high strangeness, of these UFO encounters where there's just very bizarre things happening, and that don't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I am interested in that kind of thing now, and not necessarily a believer, although I probably lean towards belief in something along those lines. I'm not a believer in religion, but I am more of a believer in the paranormal at this point of the journey. And that sense of what happens when there's something that happens, or maybe it doesn't happen, or maybe it's just in your mind, but that is so weird. And you're in this, especially if you're in a group setting, which is kind of what happens in the end. It's like, okay, what exactly happens? Who is seeing it, and what are they seeing? That's one of the reasons why I switched it up a little bit towards the end, and you get to see this paranormal event occur through 3 different pairs of eyes.
Yeah.
So then you can decide for yourself, what is this?
Yeah, I like that, the way that happened and the way you set that up, because it did make you make me wonder, at least exactly that, where I'm like, all right, well, which one do I believe? And they're all seeing something, and so and then there was like that surprise show up on, I'm gonna say stage, but on the pulpit. I really like too. I was like, all right, cool, we're down for this. And and I think and let me, I know you gotta go, so I don't know if you want to say anything before you have to head out.
Yes, I was really happy to meet you, Nicole.
Good to meet you too.
We'll plug you, Vitlame, at the end.
Yes, I got a balance.
All right.
Hey, guys.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye. What I dug is the high strangeness thing and this kind of like mystery thing. And again, I'm not going to spoil it, but you have a setup at the beginning, and then you have a scene in the park that I think for me was the one that really like does put you on that kind of like on that edge where you're like, all right, well, how much of this is real? How much of this is just a breakdown? And then that kind of like exudes out into the rest of it, especially then there at the end. And then that last chapter was just like awesome because you don't know. You're like, well, who's seeing what and where, and like this time frame. That like captures that kind of cryptid Mothman ghost alien kind of thing just like so well.
Right. And the way I see it is that something actually does happen that's paranormal, but it's seen as different things in different people. So different spectators are going to see that event in different ways. But because I think it's, on the one hand, it is a little, it's interesting to play with psychological ambiguity, but you don't, it's almost a trope to say, oh, well, it was all in her mind.
Yeah.
And it's a cheat, to say, oh, all this is, easily explained away, and actually she just is crazy. I enjoy writing about people with mental health issues because I have mental health issues, and it just as part of my way of looking at the world is that the world is a weird place, and consciousness is a very weird thing, and perception and mood and tone, and you get the sense that there's possibly there is something that we can call objective reality, but we never see it because we are in this certain context that puts limits on our objectivity at the very least. And so you have this kind of poetry of existence instead, where, you know, this kind of like the scenery, this texture of how the world looks, you know, that my way of looking at the world is influenced by the lighting in my house, by the kind of windows that are in my house, by the fact that the cat has torn apart the mini blinds. And so you have these mini blinds that are torn apart hanging down in the window. That, you know, I'm living in the Midwest where it's gray, where, you know, and that I have these houses around me that are all very close by, because it's an older subdivision and all this kind of thing. You have this kind of psychogeography going on. And I think you always have something going on, psychogeography. You could, psycho art, you know, et cetera. There's always a psychological element that is making it so we can't really assess reality properly, and we have to go with this knowing that there is a subjective element. And I like to kind of play with that idea and to see where it goes.
Yeah, no, that definitely comes through here, and it's great. And it's so true too. It's just, I always kind of I like to think about that kind of thing and just imagining. Yeah. So anyway, that works really well in this, and just like plays with where your thought process is, and like, is she what she claims to be? Is she able to speak in these phrases for a certain reason?
Right.
Well, what was interesting listening to that response too is like I noticed, I don't want to say like, I feel it's something kind of similar for your works is like one thing I've noticed is your stories tend to focus on characters whose realities begin to fall apart around them.
Mm-hmm.
But you always do it in a very unique and interesting way where like every time it happens to the character, I'm always surprised and shocked. Like, what's going on with like what you're able to convey in your books? But I do think it's interesting with your response, just how the way you like to focus on our perception of reality and how that perception changes on whose eyes that we're looking through.
I just find the disintegration of reality very intriguing, because I've had it happen a couple of times to me. And also because it's now manifested on a grand scale, with the way that you have half the population believing, you know, the most blatant lies. Basically we have at least half the population under the influence of crazy propaganda, you know, and conspiracy theories and this kind of thing. So for me, to some degree, it's inescapable, because that is, I think that there is a theory out there that I have heard that every novelist essentially only writes one novel, and after the first one, all the others are simply variations on a theme. I don't know if I would go that far, but I do believe that novelists have obsessions, and I think that different novelists play with different, you know, there's, most novelists have a trait that they're known for, or a trait that they have acquired a reputation for. And I will be, there's no way that I can evade that educated assessment there, which is that my books are all kind of about reality falling apart around people. And part of that is because I've always appreciated a good person falling apart narrative. There's a wide variety of them. You know, Catcher in the Rye is probably the first one that I ran into, of a novel about someone falling apart. But, you know, then there's others like Bright Lights, Big City, by Jay McInerney is another one. And a lot of Sylvia Plath is about people falling apart. And so on and so on and so on. And so I find there's a truth in that. And it is alarming and maybe even horrific to know that reality at any point can break apart, and the things that you took for granted can be rattled around, and things you thought were certainties may not be certainties. I mean, and we also live in a moment of uncertainty in terms of physics and the what we know about conjecture about quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement, and the possibility of a multiverse, and these kinds of things, all of which are, I think, at a very primitive stage of being understood and are easy to misunderstand and misemploy. And of course, every charlatan who is involved in paranormal kind of things will often just haul out the adjective quantum to to make money off something like, oh, this is quantum astrology, or quantum this, or quantum medicine, quantum healing, to kind of make themselves sound like legitimately scientific. But yeah, we are living in an age of uncertainty, and I can't, and I've always just, my approach has always been to be honest about this kind of stuff, about how I feel emotionally, at least, and to say, this is kind of how I feel, that, the reality is unstable. And the other thing is, like, what if reality is not one thing? What if reality changes from moment to moment? Certainly, if you live long enough, you will find that things that were absolutely forbidden when you were a child are now commonplace. That's just the way of the world. And in reverse, things that were commonplace in the past are now few and far between, or frowned upon, or whatever. So in that sense, the social context changes, and the social context is part of a reality. So reality changes. And then, of course, the reality of aging, that I have arthritis, and so I have this little finger, my pinky finger on my right hand, that is veering off in its own direction, like it's declaring independence from my hand. And I don't want it to declare independence from my hand, but it's like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, kind of like veering off to the right. And so your body changes, and you get these gray hairs, and you get these, bifocals, and you have this whole, group of young people that come up behind you who are have a different way of looking at the world, just because they're younger, which is the way of the world. Every generation comes along with a different point of view than the one before it. But now these people are like, your doctor, my doctor is younger than me, my dentist is younger than me, and it's like, and you're not used to it. And so, yeah, I mean, and so in a sense, that's part of the ever changing, the mutation of reality. And then there's things like, the daylight shifts and the shadows shift, and the temperature changes, and so reality is always changing in that way. Right now it may be 50 degrees outdoors, but in an hour that's not going to be the case, and the world will look very different, and it'll feel very different, and the psychogeography of my street is going to be very different in just a couple hours than how it is now. And that's the kind of thing I think that the modernists really touched on, like in the early 20th century, like novelists like Virginia Woolf, or other people talking about basically the unfolding of reality, kind of layer by layer. And that's not necessarily a very sexy topic for horror fiction, but there is a tradition of addressing that in the weird. I think particularly in Thomas Ligotti's work. There is, I think, The Night School, his short story, is kind of along those lines. And so that's why I kind of feel like I'm probably more at home in the weird, whatever that means, than in horror.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it's such I mean, you bring like a ton of amazing points in there, and it is fascinating, just like thinking about, I mean, something as simple as you talk about, like as a kid and then as an adult, that changes. And like even like here in Michigan, like weed is legal, And it's fascinating to think about, where as a teen, you had to have that one friend that had like a cousin that would get you weed. And now it's every street, for me anyway, in Kalamazoo, it's like you can't throw a stone without hitting a weed shop. And it's fascinating to kind of think about. But then that changes the whole.
It's the same here in Massachusetts.
and it changes the whole landscape. It's like it's such a mundane kind of like thing to kind of like think about now, where you're like, yeah, I went to the grocery store and then I went to the weed shop, and like before it was this kind of shady activity, and it's just that kind of changes the way everyone thinks and the way the world kind of works here and in Massachusetts and in plenty of other states. But it's bringing that up, and like even the concepts of light, and you brought up like with the blinds a while ago, and how that kind of can change your perspective on things. And then that's like that unreal look at your house or your street. And it is such a fascinating kind of topic to explore and look into. And yeah, I mean, like you can definitely see that like in Legati's work. And I think in here in Plastic Priest, you can kind of see that, like even through her mind of just wanting to be and not wanting to be, and looking at, what was it, Christ Dream, I think it was, and looking at looking at like different ways to look at the church and look at how to preach and how to kind of spread the word to people. And you have that too with like kind of the almost mega church, which is another kind of unreality of looking at how to talk about the Bible and stuff like that. And it's just it's a very interesting world to explore and look at. And I think that's I think it's W capital weird, and I think it's something that more people could look at and think about. So it's very cool to kind of hear your
and they don't necessarily have to be smoking weed while they read it, right? I mean, although again, we're free associating here, and just to reassure people. Although we're mentioning weed, and we're also mentioning distorted reality and how things change. And man, if you ever really thought about it, how if you look out your door at 1 hour and then a couple hours looks so different, whoa, mind blown. But actually, I mean, it's been probably about 20 years since I've availed myself of any marijuana. And that's the thing. I write this stuff completely straight. Like I haven't had a drink or a drug in 19 years, and so it's just my brain and what it does, and so but yeah. So if you'd like to take a hit of a joint from your neighborhood weed shop in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or Massachusetts, feel free to. I'd be open to any sponsorship opportunities. If a weed shop wants to make me the official author of their weed shop, I'd gladly do a paid endorsement. But you don't have to be a stoner to like Nicole Cushing. I think that's true. That's the lesson that we've gotten here.
This is I enjoy it all, and I am not a stoner.
Oh, there you go.
I enjoyed it all, and I am a stoner. So you get one stoner's perspective and one non-stoner's perspective.
Yeah, there you go. Two sides of that coin. Right there.
So. Well, there you go. I mean, it's like what you get the munchies or something afterwards. So just get a pizza, get some weed, get the book, settle down,
just like chill out. You'll be happy.
Get a little microdose of Cushing. That's one of the things.
Oh, see, it's right there. Oh man.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I recommended as a marketing slogan to Cemetery Dance when they were coming up with ideas. I said, well, you could just say it's like a microdose of Cushing because it's a novella, and they did not go for that. I guess I mean,
honestly, I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
So people should read this. This is great. It's coming out in December 15th.
Yep.
let's maybe just real quick, because I know we're getting close. Maybe if you want to talk a little bit about what's next.
Oh yeah, sure. So I am in the process of completing a new book, which currently looks like it's going to be a short novel, about 40-ish thousand words. The working title is The Pessimistic Adventures of Giggle Noose. So Giggle Noose is all one word. It's a last name. The main character's name is Francine Giggle Noose. And Francine finds herself the victim of a horrible bone disease, much like my own arthritis, but grotesquely exaggerated, and finds herself in this hospital, which is, for the care of patients like hers, and is nightmarish, and she wants out of the hospital. She wants euthanasia. And so it's about her quest for euthanasia and her quest for other things after she completes euthanasia. So it's cheery. It's John Waters meets Thomas Ligotti, and with, of course, my own unique sort of merriment. The Buddha makes an appearance. Buddha is in there. There are demons in there. There are angels, it's just very dark humor, and a little bit sillier than this book. So this book is like my attempt to do something semi-mainstream. The Plastic Priest is like, if I wanted to have a book that I could send to my mom for my mom to read, this would be like The Plastic Priest would be that one. Giggle Noose is completely raunchy, full of scatological references and pessimistic references, and dark humor. So that's the next one. And I'm, like I said, right now I just wrote a pivotal scene towards the end. I have like maybe one or two other scenes to go, and then maybe letting it lie fallow for a week, so I can kind of reapproach it with fresh eyes. And then my goal is to get it out by the end of the year. Yeah. So that's what's going on that front. And we also have an event coming up at Butcher Cabin Books, Louisville's wonderful little independent horror bookstore. On Saturday, December the 17th, I will be there to help kick off the release of the book. So from 3 to 6, I'll be hanging out at the bookstore. I'll be doing a reading. I have bought a little piece of wardrobe. I'm gonna let it be shielded in secrecy, but a piece of wardrobe for the reading and the appearance that is going to be playful and wonderful. So and we have a little cardboard cutout of Krampus that's going to be there. So you can get your picture taken with Krampus. And Butcher Cabin's a fun little store, and so if you're in the Louisville or Southern Indiana area, or Lexington, Kentucky, or Columbus, Ohio, even, I don't know how far down that you want to come, but that's a long drive from Columbus now that I think about it. But come on down to Louisville and hang out, and it gives you an opportunity to get away from your family. If you have some kind of like annoying family event that you want looking to weasel out of, just tell them that you have this important literary event to go to. And I will gladly serve as your excuse to get out of holiday festivities. Fun.
Will you sign doctor notes?
I don't know if I'm willing to go that far. that sounds like a way to get myself in the who's gal. And if I were a younger person, maybe so, but I'm 50, and so if I get locked up for 30 years, that's kind of my whole life. I won't necessarily do doctor notes, but you don't have to lie to that degree. You just tell them that it's an important literary event. Tell them that there's all kinds of networking that's going to be happening, this kind of thing. It's good for your career. You'll make it back up to them by being there on Christmas Eve or something, and go from there.
I love it. Oh my god, that sounds incredible. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
I don't. I feel like kind of guessing, but I don't want to guess what your costume. It's not a box, is it?
A box?
A
No,
cardboard
it's not.
box?
It's not a box. It's not a box. I will post pictures after the event, and so that way it'll be available for all to see.
Amazing. I love it.
That's awesome. And where can our listeners get in touch with you, Nicole?
Well, I'm on Twitter. Well, actually, I'm not really on Twitter anymore. Really, I'm not. I'm really not. The place is kind of gunky with the sludge of awful anti-Semitism and terrible things. So I'm not really on Twitter anymore. I haven't deleted my account, but I'm not really posting there. So I am on let's see, Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm probably on Facebook most of all. I am on Threads, and I'm on that Blue Sky thingy. So between all of them, getting a hold of me that way. My website is NicoleCushing.com. That's NicoleCushing. There's no H in Nicole, just an H in Cushing. And feel free to email me. My contact information is there. I'd be gladly to correspond with you and offer you my own disturbed take on life, the universe, and everything.
And Matt, what about you?
Well, I am still stuck on Twitter, Brandenburg DM. I'm on Blue Sky. I try to get on there. I don't know. I always forget that exists. But I'm there, just my name. And yeah, I guess the only other thing I can plug real quick is there is an anthology that just came out this week called No Lives Left. Brian Barry published it. I think it's Splatter Inc. Not Splatter Inc. It's Splatter something. He just started this publication. I should know it. I have a story in there. It's something that has been in the works for a year and a half. There was a big story behind it, but that's out. So look up No Lives Left if you like video game horror. I'm in there. Judith Sonnet's in there, and a bunch of other people are too. So check that one out. And that's it for me.
And I am not on Twitter. I am on Facebook, and I am trying to get the Abyss account on Blue Sky to do more social media with Abyss. But reach out to me on Facebook. Reach out to me on Blue Sky. Just follow my name, Richard Gerlach. And this is Richard Gerlach saying, keep staring.